money is not just about numbers. It evokes powerful emotions, not just emotions. They can help us or hinder us from our financial success. So being emotional about money is not a bad thing. And again, just like almost everything we talk about, we're not going to teach you something to be unemotional about money 100% of the time.
Yeah, if you're sitting in the corner lighting money on fire because you don't care at all, yeah, that's a problem.
Right. So we're always going to have this. It's about the awareness, right? Welcome back to Money Therapy. We're glad to have you back here with us. We appreciate your time and appreciate you listening and really hope you do get some incredible value out of this. My name is Brandon Chastain. I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm Bill McGill.
And today we're going to talk about something that we have kind of spoke to in the past. It's good to hear. It's good for us to teach it because when we teach it, it helps reinforce us so we can be better for our clients. It's good to hear this. Honestly, we could probably hear it every day of our lives and still not master it for decades and decades and decades. So it's about becoming, just better human beings and more in control of that thing we call happiness in our lives. And if we don't take time to think about some of these things, oftentimes we get overwhelmed and we feel like we can't be happy. And if we just put forth a little bit of effort and listen to Money Therapy, of course, we can kind of push in and seek out that happiness. So today we're going to talk a little bit about just that the fact that money has very, very little to do with math.
Yeah.
Of course, it does have some to do with math, but more importantly, it has to do with emotions. And I was preparing for the show. We were preparing for the show, Bill. But I wrote down something that I didn't talk to you about. And it came, but I was reading a quote that I had jotted down. And the quote says, "Emotional awareness and open communication are key to unraveling financial challenges." I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
Emotional awareness and open communication are key to unraveling financial challenges. I made some notes after that, and I kept using the word "we." And I was like, well, maybe not everybody has a "we" when it comes to their finances. We.
That was a dad joke right there.
It was. The point, though, is as I started thinking about it, I was like, man, you know what? Even if you think your finances are only affecting you when it comes to that part of open communication, I bet you're still relying on someone when it comes to your finances. And before I throw this to you, my thought is a lot of us are in relationships and a lot of us communicate our finances between spouses or to our children. Hey, we can't afford that right now. Hey, we can spend a little bit more right now. Hey, we're going to take a trip. Our kids are picking up all the time what we're kind of putting out there. But when we talk to our spouses too, some people don't have that family.
Sure.
But you still got parents probably.
Yeah.
And if you don't have parents, you probably got friends, family. Or if you don't even have them, you might even just have the book that is helping you lay out a financial plan. I really have this gut feeling that very, very, very few people have no outside influence or help when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we're all influenced by, what we read, what we see, outside influences, your broke cousin down the street who's got an opinion and those sorts of things. But not that I have broke cousins down the street. I don't know why I said that. But I think finance, one of the threads that we see a lot, and the thing that spoke out to me when emotion equals, feelings equals money, is I think a big part of our job, and one of the things that I like to try and convey, that we like to try and convey on this podcast, is give you guys a little bit of perspective on what it's like as financial professionals to try and help people. And one of the things that we run up against is that feeling of, I think people feel like they are on their own. A lot of times, even when they're in relationships or married or whatever the case may be, but particularly when, take a single person, I think people often feel that they are alone in their financial journey, and they try and do some research on their, for themselves. They go on Google, YouTube, wherever, and they get that outside influence that most of us are subjected to. And then we as financial advisors, a lot of time, we're trying to break through that and trying to get to the emotion of things. People come in and they have all these ideas of what they need to accomplish, what they want to accomplish, what their goals are. How often have we heard somebody come in and say, hey, I need to open an IRA. I read about what it is. It sounds like a great idea. We got to get that going. And your prescription for them after your conversation is actually completely different. Right. And it's, hey, sometimes it's, we need to pump the brakes and do A, B, and C first, and then do something like that. So I think we're always, as financial professionals, combating that feeling of that person being alone in their financial journey, already have been influenced by those outside, either individuals, books, wherever that may have come from. And I think that brings a little apprehension and presents a challenge to us. But I think that feeds nicely into this episode where, the headline of this episode is, feelings equals money. Money doesn't equal math.
Right.
It is a component, obviously, of it, but more often than not, we're combating emotion than we are the actual math.
Yeah, and going back to that quote, I wrote down, what was it? Sorry, notes are a mess. So emotional awareness and open communication are key to unraveling financial challenges.
Sure.
And you said people come to us and they often feel alone in their financial journey. And I immediately just wrote down a question mark. Like, why do you think people feel alone? Like, if you got a family, like, if you got a financial planner, why do you feel alone? Like, and I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. I think even if we surround ourselves by a spouse, by a family, by, a dad or mom, if we put ourselves in the room with a CFP, like, why do we still feel alone in our journey? And I think that reason is probably just a lot to do with the fact that we have a hard time communicating what we're feeling when people come and talk to us. Like you were saying, like they come in and say, hey, I need an IRA. Yeah, but let's back up. Tell me who you are. Tell me what's your thoughts. Tell me your background. Tell me how you grew up. Tell me what your goals are. Tell me what you're actually trying to achieve. And let's then prescribe the action, right?
Yeah.
So that is, I think a lot of people do feel alone, but it's probably because we just suck at talking about our feelings.
Yeah,
We're good about talking about money.
Yeah.
I'm not as impressed anymore, but I remember early on, people could come in and bring me a statement, and they could tell me everything about their trailing 12 returns. They could tell me so much information about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, all these things that they have in their portfolio. They could tell me standard deviation. I mean, they could tell me a lot of really intelligent stuff about their portfolio. And I'm like, well, like, is this a good portfolio? Like, well, what's your goal?
Yeah.
What do you mean, what's my goal? Like, well, this might be a good portfolio, but is it good for you? Is it good for you right now?
Yeah.
So tell me what your goals are. Tell me who you are. Tell me what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about whether that portfolio is good. People can articulate all the science and all the math in their portfolio, but when you talk about their emotions, they just can't communicate that. So that's probably why they feel alone.
Yeah. I think, emotions are definitely complicated, and I think that people get a lot of times wrapped up in their own thoughts in their own head, and we're all victim to this. I do this all the time, but you tend to get to a spot where sometimes you feel that, what I'm going through in my life right now, or the way that I'm feeling about what I'm going through in my life right now, no one else has ever felt this way.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal thing to you. And us as financial professionals, like everybody goes through this
Right.
most of the time. And so you've got the one end where maybe that person's feeling apprehensive about sharing thoughts and emotions because, because of all the reasons I just listed. Maybe they feel they're being judged or they should be in a better spot than they are. They're coming to a financial professional to get ahead in some way or get better footing. And so we're combating all of those unsaid emotions. And
Yeah.
so I think that's why that's a really good key is the better the financial advisors in this industry that I look up to are professionals at getting to the emotions quickly and actually figuring out what matters. Yeah. IRAs, mutual funds, ETFs, those are all tools in my tool belt that I'm going to use to help, but I need to figure out what hurts.
Yeah. And if you're a financial professional listening to this podcast, like, you could be really, really, really great at managing portfolios and you could be really great on the math side. But when you learn to stop, be empathetic, listen, and apply that emotional, that EQ side of the equation, that's when your practice and your profession will become more, your practice will grow, your profession will be more fulfilling, and your clients will be happier.
That's right.
So let's do this. Let's jump in. I want to know, so I wrote down some ideas here, but why is money so emotional? Like there's just not very many people out there that have no emotion when it comes to their money. And if you say, "Hey, I'm not that emotional about money," cool. Let me come rob you. Let me, come invest it and let me squander it away in some like foolish investment.
Yeah.
Let's intend to give it to someone who let's give it to someone who just, throws it down the drain. You'll get emotional about it. You'll be upset, angry. If you got a paycheck and, we're staring down this like debt ceiling argument stuff going on in Congress, right? Like, there's a real chance that some people will not get their Social Security check in the mail in the next month, 2, 3, whatever. There's a chance. It's not for sure. We're not calling anything there.
Right.
That's not really what we do on this show, but we're attuned to that, and we're watching these budget conversations and deliberations and negotiations between, a couple people that even once they get it approved or once they say, "Hey, yeah, shake hands, that's the right call," they still got to take it back to their parties and pass the law. And right now they have like 10 days to get it done.
Yeah.
I'm not super confident. It's scary. It's scary at least.
Yeah.
And so, hey, I don't really care about money that much. Well, when, a third of the population doesn't get their Social Security check, like you'll see that people get really emotional about their income.
Sure.
But why? Why? So let's start at the bottom of the pyramid, that hierarchy of needs, Maslow, that smart fella.
Yeah.
He said that at the end of the day, like we need to be able to kind of survive and be safe.
Yeah.
We can't worry about anything else until these basic human needs are met.
Sure.
So money is closely linked to our survival needs. I need money in my account to go get food.
Yeah.
I need, money to get gas to get to my job. If I'm without any money, without any gas, and something happens to my daughter, can I get her to the hospital if she needs to go? Like, how do I handle that? Well, call 911. Okay, what if I couldn't pay my cell phone bill?
Yeah.
So we need the money. If we don't even have enough to feel safe and secure in the world and the society that we're living in, that's problematic. And you can understand why people would be really, really emotional about that. And there are people listening. There's people that come into my office that I talk to, and it's a legitimate conversation. Like, how do we figure out the financial picture the situation that they're in? How do we figure out enough to make sure food is on the table?
Yeah.
And they got AC in the summer and heat in the winter.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even talking about like Hulu and Netflix and which one to keep.
Right.
We're talking about food and shelter and not becoming a heat casualty, right? Like,
right.
So understand, like, when the the most basic needs start to get solved, it does not mean that we're done worrying or done being emotional. It just means now the whole rest of the world opens up, right?
Sure.
So, and we've said this before, and I read this a while back, and I've talked to several people about it. Like, there's a tipping point where you start to have enough money
Yeah.
that the fear of meeting your needs goes away.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole new fear of like, how do I not lose it? How do
Sure.
I never go back there?
Yeah.
And it's a real fear too.
Yeah.
And it's not less or more. It's another real fear that people have when people that like the have-nots in the world think, oh, if I just had enough, if I had this much money, I wouldn't be afraid anymore.
Right.
And the reality is you'd just be afraid that you never wound up. Like, what can I do to prevent that?
Sure.
So it's just a whole different thing. So understanding like it's tied closely to money. Money is feeling. Money is emotional because it helps us meet our needs and survive in the world that we live in. Another reason why money is so emotional, and you can check out our previous episode. But money's super emotional because of social comparison. So we are always comparing ourselves to one another.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when we see everybody having a little bit more, we want it too. And we're like, hey, what is it about me that I don't deserve that?
Right.
What is it about me that I don't deserve the promotion? Like, they got a promotion. Am I that bad of a person?
Sure.
Their business is successful and mine isn't. What is it about me? So we turn it into something super personal.
Yeah.
And again, we're focused only on what we can see in the situation.
Right.
I meet a lot of people that are like, I should work. I should make more money. I should be making more money, but my boss won't give me a raise. And I'm just like, oh, cool. Well, why don't you just start your own business? Why don't you do this, this, and this? Why don't you take steps? Oh, well, I don't want to work that much.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't deserve it, but that's fine because you're happy with your time,
Yeah.
right? What's your thoughts? You have any thoughts there?
Yeah. The thoughts that I have are not to go. I'm going to go super psychological here real quick. But when I think about money and I think of, how I use my money or how I advise people use their money, I think part of the reason why it's so attached to us and why it's so unbelievably personal is that I think that when we walk through our lives, we are trying to, for the most part, we're trying to build something. Either build something better or maintain what we've built in our lives. And with our society, money is how you do that for the most part. I mean, like we, said earlier, like money is an essential part of our lives.
Yeah.
It just is. And so I think people are afraid of an audit essentially on how, I think we talked about, credit card debt and, propping up lifestyles that maybe some people can't necessarily, actually afford. And when you compare yourself to them, it may not be a fair comparison because maybe they're putting that boat on a credit card or something. And,
Right.
and you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourselves. Because you don't have a boat or you're not where your neighbor's at, or, we've talked about all those things on the podcast. But I think when you actually for real sit down and look at your finances, people tend to get very defensive because it is emotional, because it's sort of an internal audit on how have I done in terms of building my life or the picture of my life that I wanted.
Yeah.
How have I done? And that tends to bring in a dose of reality.
Well, I think that is one of my bullet points that I wrote down is like identity and self-worth.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're saying is like how easily our money gets intertwined, probably unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't. Our identity, our self-worth should never be, it should not be affiliated at all with the dollars I have in my bank account. If I have more money than you, I shouldn't feel better about who I am than you feel about who you are. If I have less money than you, I definitely shouldn't feel worse about myself.
Sure.
But that happens
All the time.
right? Like we find ourselves in circles where it's like, man, like I don't belong here. Like
Yeah.
why don't you belong there? Because you don't have the same numbers, and the same amount of dollars in their bank. Like that's evidence that those feelings, those words, that's evidence that we are not in a healthy relationship with money.
Yeah.
Right? Like if so we need to start doing that. One other place that I would go to figure out why we're emotional about money is thinking about like our childhood, our relationships with our parents, and seeing and learning from, and not learning. Like I ask clients all the time, like, hey, what did your parents teach you about money?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, they didn't really talk to me about money that much. Like, no, they still taught you.
Yeah.
What did you learn about money?
Right.
I remember there was an investment that I was trying to talk a client into for his portfolio. I thought it would be a good fit. It met their goals, their time horizon. It was risk appropriate. There was a lot of consideration about adding something to this portfolio that would, just make it a little bit more robust for the client. And I presented it to the client, and just some words that I used had nothing to do with the investment.
Sure.
Some words that I used, his response, once I got done kind of pitching this idea to him, was, man, like, you said this, and it really kind of made me think of like when my dad lost his job in 2008. And I was just like, man, like, that's kind of funny that that's what you took away from what I was giving you.
Yeah.
Because I was giving you so much more than that.
Sure.
But nonetheless, like just observing his dad kind of lose his livelihood back in 2008
Yeah.
was enough, so emotional, that me saying a couple words that had nothing to do with the investment per se,
Yeah.
it just reminded him. So it put a bad taste in his mouth, right?
Sure.
So why do we get emotional about money? Again, we need to meet our needs to survive. We need to feel safe and secure. We are constantly learning from our surroundings. And this started all the way back when we were really, really tiny, little infants, growing up, toddlers, unconsciously learning and picking up these behaviors and attitudes that our parents and our families had. We've been through circumstances that make us, places we want to feel that again. Like maybe you had a big bonus check one day and you're like, man, I need this every day.
Yeah.
On the flip side, maybe you've been where you're just like, hey, I can't eat tonight, and maybe tomorrow I can grab some ramen.
Yeah.
And we never want to go there again, right? Mm-hmm. And then we also fall into the trap of doing that comparison to others, and then we start letting our net worth like influence our self-worth. And now all of a sudden we're not in a healthy relationship with money. We're being emotionally abused by money.
Sure.
And so that is where we're at. Everybody at the end of the day wants control of their life, and they want some semblance, whatever it is to you personally. You want some kind of financial freedom.
Sure.
It might be financial freedom to the extent like, hey, I just want to be able to pay my bills and not be scared to not eat. It could be, hey, I want to retire, or in my 60s. It could be I want to retire in my 50s. It's like, hey, maybe I just want to be able to like not have bills at all so I can work freelance when I want to and backpack Europe whenever I want to, right?
Right.
So it's absolutely understandable why we're emotional about money. So if we can all understand why we're emotional about money, then why in the world do we jump to the math side of the equation when our spouse comes up and says, hey, I really want to spend some money on this? Immediately, we don't have that kind of money. You're jumping to the math side. You're not hearing the emotions. Like, wait a second, like I might go home and be like, hey, I really, my daughter might come up and say, hey, Dad, I'd really like to buy this thing. I'm like, Ellie, well, you're not spending money on that. But like, I'm jumping to the math side, everything that I know about money, and I'm jumping to the math side of things. Instead, I'm like, why does she need this? Why is she asking me for this right now?
Yeah.
Is there something about life right now that's making her feel unsafe.
Yeah.
And this is a mechanism to bring in that safety. Is there something about her that's feeling like worthless? And this is a mechanism, not a healthy one, but are we asking to spend money so we could be equal to somebody else and feel more worth? Like maybe I just need to tell her I love her.
Yeah.
And that she's amazing and she's an incredible human being, and put my arm around her, hug her. And so like when we're talking to people about money,
Yeah.
and the instinct is to jump to the math side. But what we really, especially in relationships, what we really need to be doing is like, okay, what's the issue here?
Yeah.
We did a podcast, I forget which episode it was, but we used the example of like me coming home and, walking in, and after being gone a couple of days, my spouse says, hey, Brandon, Kate next door just redid her kitchen.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm like, you want to redo your kitchen? We don't have the money to redo the kitchen.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I don't want to redo the kitchen. I'm just telling you, I'm just making conversation.
Yeah.
Well, no, what you're really saying is you don't like our kitchen. And now we're all of a sudden fighting about money.
Yeah.
So the point is even if in that scenario you did want to redo the kitchen, like what about this conversation can I lean on the emotional side?
Yeah.
And if I truly don't feel safe spending the money, maybe as a spouse too, you could understand like, okay, he's going to have this reaction because his income varies so much and our savings account's a little low. So maybe part of this conversation is to say, not right now, but I would like to add it to our goal board, our vision board to upgrade the kitchen, right? So
Right.
all thoughts there.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are just, maybe a practical thing to give to some of the listeners, something that I use with clients as well as my own personal relationships is, ask yourself, take a step back and ask yourself, is this a need or a want? Mm-hmm. And be curious about that answer. And that a lot of times will lead you to the actual answer. So if, an example from the other day is my wife came to me and said, hey, can we, I want to buy this, like security camera system. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, my response was, okay, why do we need it or do we want it? And the only thing that comes to mind there is maybe there's another way to solve this problem.
Yeah. Well, and I just love the word that you use, be curious.
Yeah.
Like ask yourself, and that's, I think, such good advice for everything in life.
Yeah. Just be curious on what the answer is. The other thought that comes up, as again, to give a little perspective as a financial professional, that hopefully people can use in their own lives. But we used to use this brochure back in the day, and the top of the brochure just asks, what keeps you up at night? Mm-hmm. And that's it. And it had a whole list of, my kid's college, retirement, and it had a list of all these things. Well, what that really did was it spoke right to the emotion. We alluded to this a little earlier on in the episode, but, I had one of my clients come in when I first met them, and they said, hey, I need to get ready for retirement. Mm-hmm. And he had this real fire. He's like, I got to open an IRA. I got to do this. I got to do that. And, I put a pause on that and really got to know him and really dug into the emotion. And we used what keeps you up at night. And it turns out that he wasn't actually really that afraid about retirement. He was afraid of, a month from now if his business was still going to be up and running because of all the bills that he had today. Yeah. Which is a completely different picture than what he came in to talk, but that's how it manifested. Mm-hmm. And so from there, if ABC was the direction we needed to go in, and then the IRA would come later, I was able to fix kind of the emotional, or at least calm down the emotional side of that with a different set of, a different set of actions than he thought he'd be getting from me. And that's all because I was curious. And so I think that that's our job as financial professionals, is to be curious and to not come in with all of our own assumptions, but try and get to the actual bottom of the emotion, the feeling that's actually driving them to come see us, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah. I think action's important, and I wrote down a few. But just to reiterate, money is not just about numbers. It evokes powerful emotions, not just emotions. They can help us or hinder us from our financial success. So being emotional about money is not a bad thing. And again, just like almost everything we talk about, we're not going to teach you something to be unemotional about money 100% of the time.
Yeah, if you're sitting in the corner lighting money on fire because you don't care at all, yeah, that's a problem.
Right. So we're always going to have this. It's about the awareness, right? So actionable steps to kind of navigate financial emotions or emotions tied to money is first of all, if you're having a conversation about money, I wrote down empathetic communication. Empathetic communication, I basically mean two things: create a safe space where you can say what's on your mind, and you acknowledge that the person's just sharing their heart, but also active listening, right? Like reiterating, hey, what you just said, I heard it this way. Is that exactly what you meant?
Yeah.
So that's important. Another one, you know, when we start to feel emotions, we've talked about this before. Journaling is huge.
Yeah.
You know, with all the notes apps and stuff, like it doesn't hurt to ever write things down. But when we start to realize we're being kind of emotional, if I'm having a conversation and I'm like, man, I'm kind of getting emotional here. I've thought of just like Lily and Marshall. Lily and Marshall from How I Met Your Mother, right? They were in a couple, they were in a relationship, and anytime they started getting into a fight or an argument, they would call timeout, right?
Yeah.
So having these like things, these agreements in place with who you're having this conversation, or just inside of yourself, just call timeout real quick, pull yourself away from the situation, and write down like what is triggering this this emotion. Why am I getting so emotional right now? If we start doing that, if we start identifying these things, then what we can also do is, again, that awareness can be like, hey, you know, put yourself 7 years down the road. And if you've put these things into practice, then you're like, hey, I'm about to go into this conversation. Generally, I get pretty defensive. So I need to prepare myself ahead of time so I don't. Or if I do get defensive, you know, I can call that time out. Maybe it's even the right thing to do to be like, hey, Bill, we're about to have a conversation about this. And just so you know, like in the past, I tend to get kind of emotional here. So I might have to walk away. It's more about me than it is you. You know, I just don't want to cause an unnecessary fight here, right?
Sure.
Set financial goals, right?
Yeah.
Like that's important because when we get emotional, we can make mistakes. But if our goals are tied to our values and our beliefs, and we have conviction over the things that we're doing, and not just have goals like, like I want to be work optional and I want to retire one day, but like also break those goals down into really small and accomplishable things that I can stay focused on the near term.
Yeah.
So because we want to solve emotional problems right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I start feeling emotionally charged about my money, I'll make a decision like about the right now, and I'll forget all about future Brandon.
Right.
But if I'm in the middle of accomplishing something that I can get done or I can knock out in the next day, 2 week, whatever,
Yeah.
then I'm going to stay fixated on that. And it's all about the right now. So deal with this emotion in a different way so I can still accomplish the right now in my financial plan. And that's really just about making small, accomplishable, like short, we call them sprints. You can call them micro actions, you know, those kinds of things. Have an emotional support system.
Yeah.
And all of it, like, this is something that we're here for. If you're, you know, whether you're doing this on your own, or you're doing this with a spouse, like we are here to be kind of that facilitator of conversation, and can be really good at identifying the emotional space of what's being said between a couple,
Right.
and making the other person aware of that. And you know, encourage, like I'd encourage everyone to practice mindfulness, reflection, journaling, all that good stuff when it comes to just how we feel about money. That awareness is huge. There's one I'm going to point out. There's a book right here. It's the Behavior Gap book by Carl Richards, and it's a little bit, probably slightly geared towards financial professionals, but it's really, really incredible, and it's not hard to read. It's very, very simple. I highly encourage Behavior Gap, Carl Richards, to kind of help you walk through some of these emotional thoughts that we tend to have about money. What thoughts you got? Anything?
Good to go.
All right. I'll leave you with this. I would just make sure that you are challenging your beliefs, your attitudes. It's okay to have emotions. Like, we all have them. It's about how we, observe. Like, we learn. We're aware of the emotions that we're having. We act with dignity and respect inside of that emotional space, and we challenge ourselves to get better. And like what you were alluding to earlier, be curious as to why we're feeling a certain way. If we're constantly getting in arguments with our spouses, if we're constantly having issues talking about spending with our children, if we are limiting, if we're like, I'm really bad about sometimes putting the brakes on too much altogether. Like, we're not going to spend any money.
Yeah.
And we got it. And, sometimes we got to ask ourselves, why? Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I feeling this way? Be curious. And that is all I got. See you guys next week.
Adios.
We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional, or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandon at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you back next week.